Hello, good morning. In this video, we are going to discuss the next topic in Unit 2, Enhanced Entity Relationship Model, known as EER model in short form, also known as Extended Entity Relationship Model. In this model, we have some topics like specialization and generalization, easier relationship and attribute inheritance, and multiple inheritance, like that. Okay, let me start. Extended entity relationship model. Okay, so what is extended entity relationship model? Entity relationship model, EERM, also known as enhanced entity relationship model. It's a high level data model that provides the extension to the original ER model. Okay, that means supports more details in the design, and also this EER modeling emerged as a solution for modeling highly complex databases. Okay, unlike the ER model, in this we are adding so many semantic constructs, so many details, so many we are going to include more and more details in extended entity relationship model. Okay, and grouping of rather than maintaining in ER model, the data will be maintained as an entity. Here in EER model, the entity will be dividing into entity supertype and entity subtypes. Okay, actually, as grouping of entity instances as various types provides two important benefits here. One is it avoids unnecessary nulls in the attributes when some characteristics that are not shared by other entity instances. Okay, why? Because some of the entity instances, when you are maintaining a collection of entity instances in one entity, some of the entities share some characteristics that are not shared by some of the entity instances. Okay, so when you are grouping the entity instances as entity subtypes and entity supertypes, provide two important benefits. Okay, first benefit is it avoids unnecessary nulls, and also the second one is it enables a particular entity instance to participate in relationships that are unique to that entity instances in entity type. Okay, that means some of the entity instances having a particular relationship that are unique to that entity instances only. Okay, so these are the two benefits. Just don't worry, students. Let me explain you clearly in the next slide. Okay, so, and the diagram using this model is known as EER diagram, or short form it is known as EERD. In this video particularly, we are going to learn the main EER model constructs, entity, supertype, entity, subtype, and entity clustering, like that. Okay, so first, entity supertype or entity superclass. Supertype, entity supertype is also known as a superclass. It's a generic entity type that has a relationship with one or more subtypes. Okay, what it means? Means entity supertype contains the common characteristics of all entity subtypes. Okay, so what it contains? Entity supertype, always entity supertype relates with one or more subtypes. That means those subtypes are derived from only the supertype entity. This supertype entity contains the common characteristics of all entity subtypes. Okay, just see this example. For example, player is a generic entity type which has a relationship with one or more entity subtypes. like cricket player, football player, hockey player, tennis player, etc. Actually, all these are the subtypes, okay, which are derived from the generic entity type player. So it's a super entity type which contains the all common characteristics of cricket player and football player and hockey player and tennis player. Okay, just see this diagram. Player is a entity super type entity which has a common characteristics, okay, and a football player, cricket player, hockey player, tennis player, all or comes from entity super type. Those are known as entity subtypes, okay. And now we are going to discuss what is subtype or subclass. A subtype, actually each subtype entity is a specialized type of superclass entity type, okay, which contains the unique characteristics of each subtype entity, okay. And also a subtype is a subgrouping of entities in an entity type that is meaningful to the organization. And also these subtype inherit all the attributes and relationships associated with their supertype. And one more thing is entity subtype cannot exist without the existence of superclass, okay. For example, consider the entity supertype engine. Okay, actually engines are two types like petrol engine and diesel engine. Actually, in entity relationship model, all those engines and the petrol engine and diesel engine entity instances are to be maintained in one entity engine. But in EER model, to add more semantics in the design, the whole entity will be dividing into two types. One is super type and next one is subtype. Okay, the super type contains all the common characteristics of entity subtypes like petrol engine and diesel engine. Okay, all the all the common characteristics are to be maintained as a entity known as engine. It's a entity super type. Whereas subtypes petrol engine and diesel engine which contains the unique characteristics of each entity subtype. That means the petrol engine has a specialized attributes or specialized characteristics that are not shared by the diesel engine. Likewise, the diesel engine has a specialized attributes which are not shared by the petrol engine. Okay, that's why the whole entity, the single entity will be dividing into two entity types like entity subtypes and entity super type. Here, the engine super type contains two entity subtypes like petrol engine entity and diesel engine entity, okay. And the second example is consider the entity type student, which has two subtypes, undergraduate and postgraduate. Already we know that the student has a common characteristics whether he is a undergraduate or a postgraduate, okay. Every student has some common characteristics. And coming to the entity subtypes, undergraduate entity has some attributes, some specialized attributes, some unique characteristics. Likewise, a postgraduate entity has some unique characteristics. Okay. Just see this diagram. The student is a super type entity, whereas undergraduate and postgraduate are subtypes. These subtypes are derived from only the super type student. Without the student super type, the undergraduate and postgraduate students are not existed anymore. And coming to the specialization and generalization. Okay, what is specialization and generalization? Actually, those are the way of process of defining how we are defining the entity subtypes and entity supertypes. Okay, there are two types. One is specialization and generalization. One is specialization. Specialization is a top-down approach. Okay. In this top-down approach, first of all, it's a process of defining one or more subtypes of a supertype. Okay, that means it's a top-down process. First of all, we have to identify a entity supertype. Okay, from that supertype, identifying subsets of an entity set that share some distinguishing characteristics. Okay, that means in specialization process, first of all, we have to identify the entity supertype. Depending upon the distinguishing characteristics, we have to identify the entity subtypes from that supertype. Okay, and it's a top down approach in which one higher level entity, that means higher level entity is known as super type entity, can be broken into lower level entities. Lower level entity means subtype entities. Okay, so simply in specialization the superclass is defined first and the subclasses are defined next. Okay, just see this diagram. Consider the entity type student, which can be further classified into full-time student and part-time student. Okay, so first of all, we have to identify the student entity, that means entity supertype. Okay, based on the distinguishing characteristics of all student instances, just from that student entity supertype, we are defining here two entity subtypes like full-time student and a part-time student. Okay, both has unique characteristics, not the common characteristics, but all students common characteristics are to be maintained in the student entity. It's a top-down process. Coming to generalization. Okay, so generalization is a reverse process. Generalization is a bottom-up approach. That means first of all lower level entities are to be identified. Okay, so based on the common characteristics of the lower level entities, those lower level entities are to be combined to form a higher level entity known as entity supertype. Okay, that means here the lower level entities are to be combined to form the higher level entity. That means first of all we have to defining all entity subtypes. So from that all entity subtypes, we are defining the higher level entity subtype, supertype. Okay, so it's a bottom up approach as two or more lower level entities are combined to form a higher level entity. Okay, and in simple terms, generalization is a process of extracting the common characteristics from two or more subclasses and combining them into a generalized superclass. Just see this diagram. Okay, for example, there are so many multiple types of musical instruments like piano, violin, and guitar. Okay, using this generalization approach, actually, piano has some unique characteristics, violin has some unique characteristics, and guitar has some unique characteristics. But all these entities, subtypes, or having some common characteristics. Okay, why? Because all these are musical instruments. Musical instruments, that too it's a string instruments, all or belongs to the string instrument. Okay, all string instrument have some common characteristics. So by using all these subtypes, piano, violin, and guitar, okay, all to be combined to form the entity supertype like string instrument. Just see this diagram. Okay, so first of all we have to identify the entity subtypes like violin, piano, and guitar. Okay, so by combining all these entities and identifying the common characteristics, we have to define the entity supertype from these subtypes. Okay, that supertype is known as string instrument. Coming to next, specialization hierarchy. Okay, specialization hierarchy means actually entity supertypes and subtypes are organized in the specialization hierarchy. A specialization hierarchy is nothing but the arrangement of higher level entity supertypes and lower level entity subtypes. Okay, in this specialization hierarchy can be explained by taking the example of employee supertype and three entity subtypes: pilots, mechanic, and accountant. Okay. Okay, so some more points. First of all, we have to know about this specialization hierarchy. Okay, actually, this specialization hierarchy always reflects the one-to-one relationship between the entity supertype and its subtypes. Okay, what it means. Just see this specialization hierarchy example. It's a aviation business school example. In this aviation business school, there are so many types of employees. Okay, like pilots, mechanics, accountants. Okay, so rather than maintaining all the employee instances in one single entity, in EER model we are maintaining grouping as employees supertype and employee subtypes based on their characteristics. Okay, here the employee entity supertype contains all the employees common characteristics like employee number, employee last name, first name, initial, hire date, and employee type. Okay, here the employee number is a primary key in the employee table which is used to identify each and every employee entity instance. Okay, and from this employee super type it derives three employee subtypes like pilot, mechanic, and accountant. Okay, so actually the pilot and mechanic and accountant having some unique characteristics of each employee subtype. Like pilot, in pilot entity it has some unique attributes which are not shared by other employees like mechanic and accountant. Likewise mechanic entity having some unique characteristics or unique attributes which are not shared by the pilot and accountant. Likewise accountant it also contains some of the attributes which are not shared by the pilot and mechanic. Okay, coming to the subtypes. Okay, actually all these subtypes are derived from the supertype. Okay, without the supertype, the subtypes are not existed anymore. And the pilot, mechanic, and accountant. What is the primary key? In all these subtypes. In previous slide, just we observe some points. In specialization hierarchy reflects one-to-one relationship between the employee and its subtypes. That means a pilot subtype occurrence is related to one instances of the employee supertype. That means in employee, each employee entity instance relates with only one subtype entity occurrence. That means each employee either may be a pilot or maybe a mechanic or maybe a accountant. Okay, and one-to-one relationship. That's why all entity subtypes contains supertype primary key as a primary key in all entity subtypes and as well as the foreign key. Okay, just you observe in pilot employee number is a primary key and as well as the foreign key. Already we know that what is primary key and foreign key. And in mechanic table employee number is a primary key and as well as a foreign key. In accountant table, employee number is a primary key and as well as a foreign key. Okay, and all contains the unique characteristics. Coming to the pilot, in pilot table, it contains the specialized attributes like employee license, pilot license, pilot rating, and pilot medication type. It's very important for the pilots, okay, which are not shared. All these attributes are not shared by the mechanic and the accountants. And employee super type contains the common characteristics like last name, first name, initial, hire date, and employee type. Okay, and coming to the mechanic in mechanic subtype, it contains the unique characteristics like mechanic title and mechanic certification. Okay, it's very important for mechanics. And coming to the accountant employee number, accountant title, and accountant CPA date. Okay, actually what is CPA date means? It's a certified public accountant certification date. Okay, actually it's an exam conducted by AICPA, which is the world largest accounting body. Okay, so it's a certification date we must have included for accountants. Okay, okay, so all are the unique characteristics. And coming to all the attributes and all the relationships of super type. And just one more point is, all the subtypes, pilot, mechanic, accountant, all the subtypes inherit all the attributes and relationships from the entity supertype employee. Okay, so these these common characteristics are to be inherited to pilot, mechanic, and accountant entity subtypes. And the employee entity supertype contains a relationship with the dependent entity. That relationship also inherited by all the employee subtypes, pilot, mechanic, and accountant. Okay, and there are so many symbols are there like circle, d, underline, okay, disjoint, overlapping constraints. So all these things are to be explained in the next video. Don't worry, girls. So it's a base managers and many other types of employees. Okay, and easier relationship. And next topic is easier relationship and attribute inheritance. Okay, easier relationship supports attribute inheritance and relationship participation. Okay, actually in EER diagram, the subclass relationship is represented by easier relation. Okay, that means pilot is a employee, mechanic is a employee, accountant is a employee, or employee is a pilot, employee is a mechanic, employee is a accountant. So easier relationship, subclass relationship is represented by easier relationship. Just see this diagram once. So the employee is a pilot, employee is a mechanic, employee is a accountant. Okay, the subclass relationship is represented by easier relationship. So the circle below the employee entity set represents easier relationship. Okay, just see this diagram. Employee type, actually this employee type attribute is known as subtype discriminator. Okay, that means it which determines which type of employee subtype is defined by this attribute. And it also establish easier relationship between the employee supertype and employee subtypes. Employee is a pilot p, if employee type m means employee is a mechanic. If employee type is A, that means employee is a accountant. Okay. For example, take a group, a person has take one entity super type person. A person has name, date of birth, gender. All these properties are very common in all persons and human beings. Okay. And but in company, the persons can be identified as employees, customer, or vendor based on what role they play in the company. Similarly, in a college database, persons can be specialized as a person. Person is an entity supertype which has a common characteristics and can be specialized as teacher, student, or a staff based on what role they play in the college as entities. Okay, so that means it is observed that the student and teacher inherit some of the attributes of the person. Okay, both student and teacher or belongs to the person. Just see this diagram. Person is a student, the person is a teacher. Okay, the person entity contains the unique characteristics, and the student and teacher contains sorry, person contains the common characteristics, whereas student and teacher contains the unique characteristics. Okay, so easier relationship means it specifies the subclass relationship with the super entity type. Person is a student, a person is a teacher. Coming to the multiple inheritance. Coming to the attribute inheritance also. Okay. So attribute inheritance means all the attributes, all the superclass attributes are inherited by the subclasses. Why? Because all the common characteristics are to be shared by the entity subtype. Okay. That is known as attribute inheritance. Coming to next topic, multiple inheritance. What is multiple inheritance? Already in Java we learned very thoroughly about multiple inheritance. Okay, so a subclass which derives from more than one superclass is called as a multiple inheritance, and that type of class is also known as a shared subclass. Okay, that means a subclass inherits attributes not only of its direct superclass but also of its predecessor superclass. That means a subclass can be derived the properties from one or more superclasses is known as multiple inheritance. Okay. Just see this diagram for multiple inheritance. A person is a person. A person is a entity supertype. From that supertype, two subtypes can be derived: employee and student. Okay, and employee, from that employee subtype, okay, it derives one more, two more subtypes like staff or faculty. Okay, like student, from student entity subtype, it is again it is a entity supertype. From the entity supertype we derive two entity subtypes like entity undergraduate and postgraduate. Okay, and postgraduate, and some of the postgraduate entities also worked as teaching assistant. Okay, um, that means faculty, just staff and faculty. From that faculty, the entity supertype, faculty has a relationship with the class. Okay, faculty teaches classes. Okay, and coming to the postgraduate, some of the postgraduate students are worked as teaching assistant. Okay, that means deriving the properties from direct superclass postgraduate and also predecessor superclass faculty. It's an example of multiple inheritance. Okay, why? Because the teaching assistant is a subtype entity, okay, which derives the properties from postgraduate entity supertype and also faculty entity uh, supertype. Okay, it's an example of multiple inheritance. And also the teaching assistant also has a relationship with the class. Why? Because the faculty and also postgraduate students can take up the classes for students. And coming to frequently asked questions, what is EER model and explain. Okay, it's for 10 marks. Then you have to write entity supertype, entity subtype, and easy relationship, specialization and generalization, easy relationship, attribute inheritance, and constraints also. Actually, constraints to be will be explained in the next video. The next question is what is EER model and explain specialization and generalization. This is for 5 marks question. It's very 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 important. Generally, the question will be given as what is EER model and explain. Then you have to write all the topics in the EER model for 10 marks. Any questions? Just listen carefully, students. If you have any doubts, just contact me immediately to clarify your doubts. Thank you.